When you had mentioned you didn't want to be a burden to your family, I think that's a common theme, right?
What are the first initial steps that someone can take just to start the process?
We have to stop thinking that everything is important.
Welcome to the Empowered Elder podcast. For many families, clutter is about far more than stuff. It can represent memories, identity, grief, overwhelm, and decades of life experiences tied to physical belongings. And for older adults, especially, the process of downsizing or transitioning into a new living situation can quickly become emotionally exhausting and deeply stressful.
According to the National Institute on Aging, millions of older adults and their families face difficult decisions each year about moving, downsizing, or adapting their homes to changing needs. Yet many people are completely unprepared for the emotional weight that comes with letting go of a lifetime of possessions.
And while decluttering is often portrayed as a simple lifestyle trend, the reality is much more complex. For seniors, caregivers, and even neurodivergent individuals living with ADHD or overwhelm, clutter can be tied to anxiety, shame, decision fatigue, and the fear of losing meaningful memories.
Today's guest believes organizing isn't about perfection. It's about creating calm, preserving dignity, and helping people move through the life transitions with support and compassion. Beth Blacker is the founder of It's Just Stuff, where she helps individuals and families navigate decluttering, downsizing, and move management with empathy and practical systems that reduce overwhelm.
Beth's work is especially focused on supporting seniors and neurodivergent individuals who may struggle with organization for reasons that are often misunderstood or unfairly judged.
And today, we're talking about how families can approach these transitions with less shame, more understanding, and a healthier perspective on what it really means to let go.
We're your hosts, Nicole Rabilato and Tasha Beckman, and this is the Empowered Elder podcast, where we talk about home, heart, and the next chapter of life.
Let's get started. Well, thank you so much for joining us. We know that you have your own podcast, and we appreciate you taking time out to be on ours.
Right.
So tell us your story. What got you involved in the organizational kind of world?
My story has changed actually in the last, I would say, 6-7 years to some degree, because when I was younger, it was really important to me to always have a place for things. I had a very small room growing up. And while I'm grateful that after the age of 5 or 6, I wasn't sharing a room with a sibling, it was still very small. And my brain just wanted order in that space. I couldn't handle seeing visual clutter. I didn't understand why it was so hard for me and why I worked so hard at it. Even in college, thinking about how important it was for when I had to sit down and write a term paper, had to do it all in one sitting, hyper focus for 12 hours. And it didn't matter if it was the first day or the last day of the semester. That's just how my brain was. And then you fast forward to, I think it was 2021, I'm thinking, that I was diagnosed with ADHD. And it all makes sense now that my brain just really craved order, but couldn't articulate why. And I was accused of being very OCD when I was younger, especially by my significant others who didn't necessarily like being asked to put things away. And to me, it just seemed logical. And how can you function if you don't have a system? And not everybody understands that or embraces that. And I had to learn how to change how I approach clients, because I was always trying to set them up for what I thought organizational success looked like, not what it looked like for them. And the one that really taught me that was my daughter, because she was diagnosed with ADD when she was 12 or 13. And there were the fights about, how to do it, forget about doing it, just even how to do it. And she just would, melt down in the middle of the room and say, I don't understand why you're making me do it this way. And that was hard for me to hear. But then years later, actually, it was great to be able to acknowledge that she was right. I was wrong. I did not understand how our brains really work, and that for some people this just isn't a superpower. They just don't know how to do it, and it's not important to them either. But what they don't realize is all this visual clutter just creates more mental clutter. The external clutter causes internal clutter and vice versa. And it just keeps going, I would say, round and round, but it's really very chaotic. It really is.
Mhm.
So how do
And
you
that,
that I was just going to say that's interesting because how do you take somebody who doesn't have that, can't visually see that, or they're not on the same path? So you said it helped you to realize that not everybody sees it that way. So
right.
how do you get on the same page if you're looking at things totally differently?
I mean, listen, I say this all the time, I'm not a therapist. So it's not like I'm going and trying to, you know, um, be a clinician that's trying to really get inside their head, but on some level I have to get inside their head and make the most important thing is making them understand there's no judgment, there's no shame, there's no blame. Not everybody has the superpower that I have. And you guys do what you do because it's your superpower. I do what I do because it's my superpower. I hire an accountant. I say this all the time. I hire an accountant to do my taxes every year because why in the world would I want to learn the tax code? Why does our country think that we should have to learn a tax code? It's crazy. But we have no problem still, saying, oh, you're going to hire an accountant. That makes sense because it doesn't make sense to learn the tax code. But when somebody tries to hire me, well, what's wrong with you? Why can't you do this yourself? There's a stigma that people attach to it because we like doing that to people in this country. I'm not saying you and me, but in general, society likes to shame people and not raise them up. And that's my job, is to raise them up and see the light, finally see the light. I talk about being meeting somebody who used to do or still does treks through Nepal, Patagonia, places like that. And I talk about being a proverbial Sherpa. I'm taking people up the mountain on their journey and carrying their burden with them, just like a Sherpa would. And what happens when you get to the top? You have that beautiful clearing. So that's, what we want to get to. We want to get to the clearing. We want to have that clarity and no more chaos and feel calmer in our space, because I will die on this argument that our visual clutter will always continue to create more mental clutter. And as we age, which is why we're having this conversation, it just gets harder and harder. Our cognitive decline happens whether we like it or not, and we will start to misplace things more and more and more if we don't have good systems in place and if we have too much surrounding us all the time.
Yeah. I love that you tied it to climbing a mountain because just like, standing at the base of a mountain and looking at it, it's so super overwhelming, but it's one step at a time to
Yep.
get through the climb. And it's the
Yep.
same for getting through the clutter and getting to that view at the top. So I
Right.
love that
Right.
analysis. That's
Right.
really helpful from a
Well, and
visual
my
perspective.
mom used to get so angry when my kids would complain about something that took too long, and she always said, she's like, there's no shortcuts in life. You got to go through it. Like,
Mhm.
and that's what I try and tell my clients. Going out and buying all the organizing stuff is the fun part usually for people, but you can't do that until you know what you're actually left with. And so our job is to come in with that set of open eyes, ears, hands, heart, obviously, and open mind as well,
Mhm.
and start just really intentionally and deliberately, dare I say, attack the stuff. Go through it, do the sorting process, make those sometimes hard decisions, sometimes not so hard decisions. But again, it doesn't get any easier as we get older. It's just going to get harder. And that's why I really do stress, even before somebody is getting ready to list their house. I mean, I don't know how many months or even years in advance some of your clients come to you, but I know that people come to me sometimes 2 or 3 years in advance, and that's great. They're ready to really do that intentional downsizing, so that if God forbid something does happen before the house does get listed, and they are ready to downsize and transition to some form of senior living, whatever that looks like for them. Going through that emotional process when you're under less stress before the listing happens, before the time really comes, before you have some sort of health related event that puts you in the hospital and then in rehab and then right to long-term care. Who wants that to happen? But it happens.
And that's true for any decision, right? So
Mhm.
we all are in that same realm of needing to learn what we need to know in order to prevent it from being in crisis mode.
Right,
Right.
right, right. I mean, my mom used to always call me her action girl. She said, "You're really great in crisis mode." And I am. I really, really am. If you need a first class ticket on a crazy, like snowbound, people everywhere, I can usually do that. Actually, I got bumped up to like upgraded seats last night on my flight home. All of a sudden, I hear my name on the PA system, and you think, "Oh God, nothing good can happen from somebody announcing your name on an airport intercom." And I walked up, and I'm like, "Am I in trouble? Like, what do I do? I've just been sitting here minding my own business, waiting for this very delayed."
Beth, I think that's some childhood stuff coming out about being in trouble when your name's called.
Yeah, yeah. And he's like, "Actually, I was going to ask you if we can upgrade you because a family didn't wants to sit together, and you would be the domino that we could move." And I'm like, "Sure." That
Not
kind of
bad.
interruption I can handle.
Right.
Not bad.
Yeah. And I have no idea why I just told that story.
It's
Oh
all good.
God.
It's all good. Hey, Beth,
Um,
can you tell us a little bit? I'm curious what led you to want to work in the space and working with seniors. What drove you to that space?
well, I mean, I do work with all demographics, but seniors have always held a very special place in my heart because I had amazing grandparents who meant the world to me. They were my rocks and inspiration. And whenever I felt like I needed, advice, my grandmother was the first person that I called. And, sometimes she would say, "Hold on, I got to get your grandfather on the phone for this one." But I was lucky. I was really lucky to be, very, very close to them, and watching them age and seeing their decline, and just being sad, that yes, they had the means to be able to live comfortably, but still, I would have done anything in the world for them if they called. Like the minute my mom actually ended up getting cancer after my grandmother died from cancer. And so when my grandfather was declining, I was the one that had to run down to Miami and deal with stuff because she just couldn't get there fast enough with cancer. So I did everything and anything I could for him. And even, in his death, I was the one that went down and cleaned out the apartment and got rid of everything. And my husband at the time, he's a mortgage lender. He arranged for the realtor and, got everything sold. So this is just something that's just been part of my being, I think, my entire life. To respect elders, to understand that we all do get old, whether we like it or not. And, we will all one day be there. And, when I was in California this weekend, my son and his girlfriend and I, we were walking back from dinner, and I noticed that there was a memory care, assisted living and memory care, beautiful building on the corner as we were crossing. I'm like, "I would live there if you'll put me there." And he's like, "I will never, ever be able to afford that place." I also tell my kids I don't want to be a burden. And therefore they can push me over the side of a mountain. I don't really care. And I know that sounds horrible, but I really don't want to be that elderly person who is a burden on the family. And, I may or may not have the choice to figure out how to not be a burden to them. But it's sad. It's sad because our choices in this country are not great. when it comes to where we're going to land and live out our remaining years. But I hope that I remain healthy enough. I really do. I don't have a lot of stuff at this point in my life because I chose when I got divorced the second time to downsize and never live in a house again. Actually, I live in a house, but it's a house share. So I don't have to deal with the maintenance. I don't have to worry about ever selling it if God forbid something happens to me. I have a pretty low maintenance life at this point,
And I think
even though
that's
I'm probably high maintenance.
when you had mentioned you didn't want to be a burden to your family. I think that's a common theme, right? There
Yeah.
are aging adults that say, I don't want to be a burden. So do you think part of the organizing and decluttering early on kind of helps with that feeling of making sure you're not going to be a burden because you're not going to have these
Right.
items remaining in the home?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there are two very like far ends of the spectrum that we normally see. We have the side that's like, I'm done, I'm getting rid of everything, I don't care about any of it. And the other side who's like, oh, but somebody's going to want this, right? And no, usually not, usually
Right.
not. But it's hard because we I'm 63. I'm looking back on more years than I probably have ahead of me. I mean, if I'm lucky, I have another 30 years in me. Hopefully healthy, happy years. But looking back on all the stuff that you do spend your entire lifetime collecting and cherishing, you can't take it with you. You certainly can't take it with you to the grave, even though I think some people still believe that. But you can't move from 4,000 square feet into 400 or 600 square feet and think that you can bring everything with you. It's just mathematically not possible. I may not have been great at algebra and calculus, but I'm really good at geometry. So my spatial awareness is pretty strong. And it just doesn't seem to matter. The people that are on that camp of, well, but I might need this someday, that someday mindset is always going to be the thing that is going to cause the most amount of anxiety once you get onto the other side, because then all those someday items don't fit. And what are you supposed to do with them now? And it's a waste of time and money and energy packing up all that stuff that might just end up in storage or in the back of a closet for the rest of that
Mhm.
person's life.
Do you think that carries down from generation though? So if you have parents that had that belief, like I might need that someday, then as their children, the boomers are saying the same thing. Do you think that they have an easier time in removing the items and the memories, or do you think that they take on that mindset of their parents?
Again, very divided, opposite ends, 50-50, I would say. I think that some people did go through the trauma of having parents who, and I don't want to call everybody a hoarder, because being a hoarder, there's a scale that determines a hoarder. But people did, save a lot of stuff that, maybe just wasn't worth saving because that's what their parents did. And they didn't understand, nobody ever told them otherwise. Or you have the total opposite end of the spectrum where they're like, I never want to be like that. And they keep nothing and they're completely not attached to anything. My kids would probably argue that I was attached to nothing. Sorry, hiccups. They would probably say that I was attached to nothing because I was that mom that the day they graduated from high school, I'm like, these soccer trophies, if you don't want them, I don't want them. Into the garbage they go. You want a picture of you surrounded by them? Great. But I am not carrying these forward in my life. They, I'm proud of them. They know, I hope they knew that. I still don't understand the difference between a goal kick and a corner kick, but that's neither here nor there now. But I have memories, and every once in a while, I send my kids pictures that pop up in my memories, and they're like, "Oh my God, I don't even remember that." And I'm like, "See, I am sentimental. I do have a little mushiness inside of me. It's just a
Well,
matter of how I organize the memories."
and talking about the memories, how do you help someone separate the memories from the item itself?
You remind them that it is the memory of probably the person or the place that is really what is pulling at their heartstrings. Obviously, you cannot bring that person back, right? So you still have the memory of the person, but we have to stop thinking that everything is important, because then we'll never let go of anything and we'll always be surrounded by too much stuff. There's always ways to preserve those memories without having the physical item. And that's the most important thing. And especially with technology, which, I do, as we discussed earlier, I do have trust issues with, but it is good for a lot of things. And there are a lot of great things that you can do from a digital standpoint, especially for seniors. They keep coming out with these really great innovation products and services that surround the digital world that are very senior friendly, which is great. The different screens and things, memory books that you can take, a room full of items and pare it down into a book and capture their stories about the items, because that's really the most important thing. It's the story. It's not the item. It's the story behind the item that's important to them. So as long as the story can be maintained, I think that is what you have to emphasize.
How do you help someone get started, though? Because just the idea of walking into a room, let alone a house, can be super overwhelming. What are
Yeah.
the first initial steps that someone can take just to start the process?
Breathing. And I mean that. I really do mean that, because, I can feel my clients just, they're so tense when we first walk in, because they're so afraid of the unknown. They think that I'm going to make them get rid of everything, and that is not my job. My job is to guide them. Remember, we're guiding up the mountain. I'm carrying the burden, the emotional and physical burden, for them as much as possible in the beginning, and making them comfortable, and constantly reminding them this is their journey and they can do whatever they want with it. But if they're not ready to let go of some things, then don't do it. Don't do it, because nobody wins. I mean, even though they may pay me money, that doesn't feel good for me. I want to know that I've done my job. I don't want anybody to ever feel like I didn't do what I was supposed to do with them. But it's hard for a lot of people. This is really, really hard at any age, but especially as a senior.
So
It
then,
really,
would you say it's a common mistake that you see, or maybe not getting off on the right foot, is when a child or a loved one comes in, they just start wanting to get rid of things and just like, you don't need that, get rid of that. And they're telling the
yeah.
parent what should happen. Is that is
Yeah,
that one of the common
that
mistakes?
does happen. Sometimes it's the child that actually wants to keep more, which creates a whole other set of problems. But yeah,
Hmm.
usually when the adult children are trying to convince them to get rid of everything, it's not helpful unless they're really patient and reminding them that they understand this is hard, but let's figure out ways of you know decluttering and downsizing so that they still feel like they have their dignity and their memories, but without all the clutter. Because it's also a safety issue for people, especially as they move into smaller spaces. If there's too much stuff in the space, they can't maneuver if they're using a walker. I mean, I have moved clients into assisted living communities where they insisted on bringing too much. And I told them that really what we should do is get storage very temporarily, because I'm not a big believer in long-term storage, but very temporarily get some storage if we ran out of time before they moved, and put the stuff that they weren't sure of in storage, and then get settled for a couple of months to see what they truly miss that might be in storage. And if they don't miss anything, then start letting it go. But when a child comes in and is telling the parent what to do, that's just going to have them melt down, and they're going to become incapacitated and paralyzed, because they're already sad and afraid and scared. So why exacerbate the situation? And that is a lot of the reasons why we get hired by adult children. They're like, I know I can't do this with them.
Mhm.
My mom used to joke that she was sorry that she was leaving me and my brother and sister with my father. And I'm like, please don't. And I love my father, don't get me wrong, but he's got his ways. And we've been we did the downsizing process when my mom died with him, but he wasn't engaged at all. He just could not do it at all. So, we were left to do everything. And there's still stuff 21 years later. It was 21 years ago yesterday that my mom died. And he still has stuff that he thinks we're going to want. And we're like, we don't want it. It's
Sure.
going into a fire when you die. I promise you, it's of no value to anybody, nobody. But it's hard. It's hard for the adult parent, and it's hard for the adult child, because there's all those dynamics of we were talking about childhood traumas, whatever. I think that we never really get over some of those dynamics that we have in communicating with our parents. I noticed that even with my son this weekend, being around him. He's now a very domesticated adult, with a house and a dog and a living girlfriend. And, and doing meal preps on Sunday night. Like it's weird, right, to see them as adults. But, I think it's still hard for my father to see me as an adult. But, there are decisions that we might have to start making for him that he may not like, just because, he is getting to that age where, he may not be able to make all the decisions for himself anymore.
So is there a
But hiring
typical
an independent party, whether it's to sell the house or find placement or whatever it is, being a home, bringing a home organizer, I think is really important.
is there a typical pattern or pacing that you work with clients throughout this process? Is there a
Um,
kind of standard to
some of
that?
it is based on their, the timeline of when they, maybe they waited too long and now they're moving out in a week or two and they didn't give themselves enough time. Um, Sometimes they've got 2 or 3 years. I'm working with a woman now for the past 7, 8 months. They're not even planning on moving. They want to be prepared should they need to, because they know at some point they're probably going to have to move into assisted living. But right now they do want to age in place. So we're doing that really slow and deliberate, intentional downsizing. And it's baby steps. It's, 3-hour sessions at a time, and, taking a couple of things at a time to ARC or wherever we take it to. Because maybe that's all that she found in those 3 hours that she could really justify getting rid of.
You're right. It depends definitely. If somebody is moving into a community within 3 months, then your pace has to obviously speed up.
Yeah.
But it's nice to know that you have the luxury. You don't have to wait until that time period. It's like,
Right.
start now. Let's just make it
Yeah.
not as overwhelming. And
Right.
then this way you're not panicked at the end, like you have to make a quick decision.
Right.
Right.
Right. I mean, listen, again, I'm only, well, not only 63. I am 63, but during the pandemic, I was in my late 50s, and I decided I had service for 48 or 64 of silver, because my mother, my grandmother, and both of her aunts all had the same pattern. So they would share it. And I ended up inheriting all of it. And I was doing one of my purges during the pandemic, and I'm like, you know what? This is ridiculous. I am never going to entertain with, service for 64 again in my life. I've done it. I've done it because I love doing all of that, and so did my mother. But I went and sold all but service for 8. I called my daughter. I said, do you think you're ever going to want any of this? She's like, I don't know. Save 8 place settings. I'm like, deal. So, it was not at all painful for me to do that. It generated a little bit of money during the pandemic, which, was a great thing. And I don't miss it. I don't miss it at all. And I'm still, a very active person who occasionally does have people over for dinner or have a dinner party, but I'm never going to entertain like that again. It's not what I do, and it's really not part of the Colorado lifestyle anyway, fancy formal sit down dinners. It's really not. So
8 seemed like a good compromise. I think that
it
place
was.
setting was good. That was good.
Yeah. Yeah.
I can't imagine where I would put
I
64
know.
people, let alone 8.
True.
I lived in Florida when my mom died, and we had a lanai, and we could open up the windows that
then there's
pocketed
that.
back
Sure.
and expand out, and set up tables out there. Yeah. It was
What do you
hot,
see-
but we did.
Yeah, for sure. Today's conversation reminds us that clutter is rarely just about physical objects. Often it's connected to memory, identity, grief, overwhelm, and the very human fear of letting go.
What Beth Blacker shared so beautifully is that downsizing and organizing aren't about forcing people to part with their belongings. They're about helping individuals and families move through transitions with dignity, compassion, and support.
In the next part of our conversation, we'll explore practical strategies families can use during major life transitions, how neurodivergence and ADHD impact organizations in ways to preserve memories without holding on to everything physically.
We'll also talk about how adult children can better support aging parents during downsizing conversations without creating additional stress, pressure, or shame.
So be sure to join us for part 2 of our conversation with Beth Blacker.
We're your hosts, Tasha Beckman and Nicole Rabilato. And this is the Empowered Elder Podcast, where we talk about home, heart, and the next chapter of life.